Okay, we are back with another episode of Done with Adulting Pod. Hey, Jared.
How are you?
Doing fine. How are you?
I'm as well as I can be in a pandemic, being quarantined, especially with everything going on.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things have changed since the last time we spoke on this podcast last week. A lot has happened. So I'm excited for today. I wanted to just first say, last week's episode, you know this, Jared, was the most listens we've ever got on any of our episodes. We have 32 episodes now, so that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's still going. We have got a lot of steam going forward. And honestly, I believe I texted you this, but I'm like, a lot of people have been reaching out to us and just saying like how brave we were and thank you for sharing. But I'm like, are we really that brave just for sharing like our life and our everyday? Like, I think I texted you that, did I not, or am I making that up?
Yeah, you did. That was an interesting perspective because I hadn't thought about that. But I mean, I didn't consider it to be like some brave act either, but I definitely feel like we've gotten a lot of positive feedback and a lot of people have learned from listening to that experience. So shout out to everybody who has listened and everybody who has shared the episode.
I was definitely happy to see that like a lot of people reached out and they said that they've actually learned a lot. And honestly, going into it, I wasn't expecting to get the response that we got. I wasn't expecting people to say they've actually learned and they're happy that we shared our experiences. But it definitely was, or I'm definitely happy that people have reached out and they were able to get that from the pod, especially with us not knowing that would be the reaction.
Yeah, so we appreciate everyone who has listened and reached out. And one of the biggest things I feel like that is a challenge for me personally, I don't know if you feel the same, Jared, but I've had a lot of people reach out just saying, I've always cared about you. I'm sorry if I haven't been, more aware of like the systemic racism that's going on, blah, 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 blah. And just asking for more information and asking more questions. And I think that's great because I feel like meaningful conversation is the key to pushing this movement forward.
Yes, and uncomfortable conversations. But to your point, like I appreciate you saying that you've always had love for me, but like I said last episode, you can't love me and then not love my people. So just because you have one Black person in your life or a few and you love them, you still need to understand that it's more than just us. And you're most likely going to interact with more Black people other than just us. So just because you love us, that does not necessarily mean that you're going to love our people, but I think you should.
Well, and a lot of messages that I've gotten have been like, I want to learn more. I want to educate myself. I want to make sure that I'm not, raising a child who has prejudiced beliefs. And so I'm happy that everyone wants to learn more.
Yeah,
yes,
we appreciate that.
I'm so happy everybody wants to learn more. However, I've spent a lot of time this week having meaningful conversations with people that are close to me in my close friends and my place of business and my side hustle, like a lot of meaningful conversation, which is great. I'm pretty exhausted from that. I wish I could have meaningful conversation with every single one of you listeners, but your girl is tired.
And it's not even because of everything that's happened this week. I mean, like we said, it's our whole life. Like we're tired and we're exhausted. But like to your point, I appreciate people reaching out and asking us what they can do, but that's not for us to tell you what you should be doing. We shouldn't have to educate you or other individuals on how not to be racist or how to support the Black community. That's something that you guys should be wanting to and willing to research and find out on your own behalf.
Agreed. However, we do recognize that since the podcast episode last week was so helpful, we do want to continue to provide just resources and a place to hold meaningful conversations. So that is a long way to introduce the fact that we have a guest today.
The triple OG ally.
Okay, triple OG ally, literally the third time on the podcast. He might as well just, be a host at this point.
They might be getting tired of you now. I don't know.
Brian Teague is back again. And Brian Teague has so graciously offered to come on this podcast today as an ally to the Black Lives Matter movement way before the past 2 weeks. and share what things he has been doing, share some experiences he has been having, offer some insight and more information to you. And we appreciate him for this because he is taking this burden off Jared and I, who have been doing this for the last almost 30 years. So, welcome, Brian.
Hello, hello.
What's up, Brian? How are you?
I'm excited to be here talking about this topic. It is a lot of heavy stuff, but I'm glad that I can come in and talk about it. And thank you both for creating space for me to come on your show and address your audience. I appreciate it. And I hope that I can be helpful and a good resource for listeners.
We are just happy that you're here, honestly. And I think seriously, I cannot stress enough how much I appreciate it because, you know, it is hard sometimes as we're having these meaningful conversations, especially as Black people. And I keep saying we're exhausted. It's sometimes really, really hard, especially in a city like Boston, where at my place of work there isn't a lot of Black people in on my team and stuff like that. I feel sometimes I really just feel like the poster child for Black Lives Matter for like my white friends and allies. And I don't want that to come off as like, you can't ask me shit about this because I'm tired. It's just, it really takes on a lot, like takes a toll a lot on your mental and physical. Because
For
I
sure.
think what other people don't realize is the same way you're reaching out to me to offer your support and ask how you can help. A lot of other people are doing the same. So I've had, I don't know. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but hundreds of texts and DMs from people who, and it's just a lot. It's just a lot all at once. So we're happy you're here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And like I always, the past 2 times I've been on the show, I'm going to preface it the same way. I am not speaking for all allies. I'm speaking for myself, and I'm going to say what I want to say. So don't email Jared and Asia and Done with Adulting Pod with your outrage. Save it, especially right now.
I always love that statement before we get into the thick of things.
Yeah. So tell us, Brian, what have you been up to in the last 2 weeks specifically before
Yeah.
we start to get into what the things you do on a regular basis. But what have you been up to the past 2 weeks as it relates to the Black Lives Matter movement?
I mean, I've been up to a lot. So I guess that I'll just kind of start from the death of Ahmed Aubrey and just the shock that came with that and the anger that comes with that, and then you learn more about the case, that it takes 2 months in the public outcry to indict somebody, to start justice, the proceedings of justice. So I'm pissed off about that. And then we know that Breonna Taylor is murdered in her bed in her own house, and there has been no denial that this was accidental and they went into the wrong house. But something that stuck out to me is she was shot in her bed 8 times. And if it's accidental, that means whoever you were going after, you went in to murder them. You did not go in there to arrest somebody, to follow or give them due process. You shot somebody in bed 8 times. So that to me. You're saying, sorry, yeah, we made a mistake, but the police tactics there are just, that's to kill. That's not to apprehend.
That's a great point.
It's really ridiculous. And a lot of this, and I want to say, I will also preface to this. I know everybody has a stake in this game here, right? So we have people with, you know, black and brown and people of color family members, and we have people that have police officers in their family. And I'm just going to speak completely freely and as mindfully as I can, but we're talking about some heavy stuff. So if it does offend you, I apologize in advance, but I don't care. So then we had George Floyd, and it is just, I couldn't watch the video. I know what happened in that video. We've seen that video 60 times. I don't need to watch a 9-minute video
Facts.
of a man, begging for his life. I don't need to see that. And to me, it's triggering. And that's as a person not of color. So everybody that's sharing that video, and when you share images online, we have to be really conscious of what we're sharing and how triggering that can be. Because everybody's already seeing this news about George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, to see video after video after video of him being murdered, to see, pictures from the 1960s and 70s and 50s and 40s and 30s and 20s and the 1890s, going back, it's just so much. So the first thing I want to ask of people is to really be mindful about what you're posting, because our friends of color are seeing that. And it's a constant reminder and a heavy burden for them to continue to see these graphic images of people they know and love murdered. So, I mean, I've been trying to, one of the things has really been monitoring my social posts that I've been doing. So, George Floyd gets murdered, and there's no real momentum for 2, 3 days. And in that 2, 3 days, I was a wreck. I really was. Not for myself, but just in a place of empathy, trying to imagine what that must feel like for all of my friends and people who aren't my friends, what it must feel like for a mother with a young male or female child of color to again have that talk, to again, have fight and discourse in their home because they don't want their kids going out of the house right now. I just try to really imagine it, and it's heavy. But the other thing is that I can never imagine it. It is not something imaginable to me because I will never have to face that. And so that's where my allyship comes from, is that's not fair. It's not right. And these deaths are preventable.
So I actually have a question for you. I've actually had this question for just all white people, but you're here, and I think that you actually might be able to answer it. I've asked other white people. I've asked other white people this question, and they really honestly did not know the answer to it, and I'm okay with that. But I'm just genuinely shocked and just don't understand. So it's going to be a loaded question. It's going to be a lot. So if you need me to repeat, let me know.
Okay.
So basically, what is it about this situation in particular that has opened the eyes of other white people, and actually made them reach out to black people and say that they didn't know that these things were going on, or they didn't know that black people live in fear for certain things, even though, like you said earlier, there's been multiple videos, there's been multiple instances, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner. You can even say the Charlestown, South Carolina church shooting, which happened by a white supremacist, Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Like, how do you see all of these videos? And you also see videos of white people with weapons being arrested and detained without conflict, but then you see unarmed black people killed by cops. The list is huge. You can keep going on. We can go back 20, 30, 40, 50 years. What is it like specifically about this situation that has opened the eyes of white people?
This is a great question.
Yeah, is it just because like we're all home right now and the pandemic's going on? Like, honestly, I honestly and genuinely do not understand what about this situation is different than the others.
Jared.
Sorry, that was a lot.
No, that's totally fine. My answer is going to be I don't necessarily know if it's one thing. I think that this was a perfect storm to start a revolution. And I saw something the other day that said 2020 isn't the end of the world, it's the start of a new one. And I firmly believe that. And
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. That was lit.
yeah, and so I don't know where all these people have been. I really don't know how they can. This is the wake up call. But what I will say is, I think, and I've said it on this podcast before, that people are starting to talk about and recognize their privilege. And privilege in the simplest form of being, just because it's not a problem for you doesn't mean it's not a problem. And I think because, over the past 3 years, I would say, white privilege, the progressive socialization of those terms has really landed with people to start to examine their behavior and to think, like, wait, would this happen to me, a white person? Would that happen to me? So I think it's that. I think it's also social media. Um, you know, 20 years ago, we couldn't share images. 20 years ago, we didn't have video cameras in our pockets. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think that people are fed up with this current administration and their lack of observation for the law. Um, and the dog whistles. See, you have to remember, this administration has been calling for something like this and supporting police brutalization. The president of the United States told, I think it's the Fraternal Order of Police, when you put people in the car, don't put your hand on their head. Don't be too
Bump their
nice,
head.
bump their head. And that's coming from the commander in chief. Okay. The one person that can declare war and dispatch an army or the Navy. So we have that. Then I think also we have, the general outrage and the pent up frustration that is quarantining and being isolated and
Yeah.
doing with those feelings.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. When you said a perfect storm, I think that does have, like, coronavirus comes into play here because a lot of people are not working right now. And a lot of times those are a lot of the people protesting are those people. People have more time on their hands.
Absolutely.
People were already a little worked up from coronavirus and being in quarantine, and you're not working. You're on social media even more than ever. Like you said, Brian, I mean, we've had videos of police brutality recorded before.
Since Rodney King.
Exactly. And it's only now that I feel like is the perfect storm with everybody being home, with a lot of people being unemployed. There's just a lot of unrest and frustration amongst Americans as a whole.
Right.
And the power of social media during quarantine has been everything that was not on social media before has transitioned. Every talk show, every news, whatever, it's all social media now, more so than ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that plays a huge part in as to why all these people are just like popping up. But I also want to say, like, I don't know if this is going to sound crazy or not. It doesn't sound crazy.
Just say
it doesn't matter if it sounds crazy.
Yeah.
There are some people that have reached out to me, white people, that have said, like, I cannot believe that this is happening. I cannot believe I haven't paid attention to this before.
Shame on them.
Although I don't want to make those, I mean, I don't want to dismiss these people, because now you are approaching me to show me that you understand you've made a mistake up until this point and you want to change and be a different person. And that's all well and good. But you also saying that has revealed to me something about you that maybe I didn't know before, or didn't realize before, or didn't notice before. And those messages are almost like some of the most hurtful ones, because you're like, what do you mean you can't believe you didn't know this was going on? It's almost like that shock of, like, the people that have reached out to me that have said that is so heavy. Sometimes it can overtake my mind. And
I think that's similar to what happened to me, because I don't mean this like disrespectfully or offensively in any way, but once we started getting all those messages, I'm like, were people really this oblivious?
Yeah.
Like, I always thought that they just didn't care, and I was cool with that. But it's like, oh, these people, like, they didn't know.
They didn't know. Yeah.
I'm like, how did you not know?
Not accepting that as an answer.
Yeah, how do you not know that Black people don't feel comfortable in certain situations? I just don't understand. Like, I guess it's my own, or I guess I was naive in that way of thinking that they knew, but it was very, very shocking to me.
I think it goes back to what I said last week about a lot of people, they might not have a close Black friend who is important to them in their life. They might meet a Black person that becomes their close friend for the first time in college, right? Like, a lot of people message me saying, like, wow, I never even thought about that. I never even thought about the possibility that the first time that I had a Black friend was the one that I met in college, right? And so if I'm the first Black friend that you met in college, and we could have a whole nother discussion about colorism, but if I'm the first Black friend that you've met in college, someone who has lighter skin, who is, I grew up in a predominantly white town, so to you, I might seem like a very approachable Black person or whatever. I don't know what. So I think that has a lot to do with it in terms of people like,
Yeah.
I didn't know this was happening. If you didn't have friends that were going through this, like I've experienced remember that time I told you, Jared, about when I went to that bar in Vermont and we were racially profiled? That experience for my white friends in that moment was like the first time, obviously, that they've witnessed something like that. Like,
But you, that's
to
your
me,
whole
it was
life.
like, it was another day in the life, and I was like, y'all need to
Right.
calm down, because anything that you say to this man is not going to change what he thinks right now about me in this bar.
And it could get you killed.
Exactly, but I don't think enough white
Fact.
people have had those types of experiences. Obviously, that's what we're talking about here, and it's insane. It has really been an eye opener.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it was just me being naive or I just didn't understand, honestly. But I'm happy to be open and understanding it now that a lot of
Yeah.
people they're just oblivious, which is I guess what happens.
Yeah.
So, Brian, you participated in the Boston protests this past week.
Yeah.
Peaceful protests, I will say.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please talk to us a little bit about your experience, a little bit
Yes.
about, because I believe you were there for the peaceful part and when the sun went down.
Yeah.
And because we all of us on this call know that the media prefers to portray only the violent parts of the protests, which are happening at night and a lot of times instigated by either police officers
Sure.
or infiltrators to the
Yep.
movement who are
Yep.
starting the violence. So,
Yep.
can you just tell us a little bit about that experience?
I absolutely can. And I'll try to be as brief as possible, but there's a lot of shit that happened. And I also want to, something that you pointed out, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday about, you know, I went back and watched the news from the protests that I had gone to. So I went to a protest Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. So a lot of protests, a lot of demonstrations, all peaceful, one not so peaceful towards the end of the night. But I looked at social media, I looked at the news, and I reflected upon my experiences, and it was three different worlds. It was like if I wasn't there in the thick of things, I would think, what the hell's going on? But what has been portrayed and played out is not what I experienced. It's definitely sensationalized.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say quickly, Friday, we met at Peters Park in the South End. Um, Great keynote speakers. The Massachusetts Association Against Police Brutality led that. Great organization if you can support them. They've laid out some legislative plans. They have you can donate to them. And their basic platform calls for the demilitarization of police and the defunding of police
Mm-hmm.
departments. Now, when people hear defunding police departments, I want you to understand that I don't mean reduce their budget to $0. What that means, the defunding is Boston Police Department, their budget for policing this year was $115 million. Okay? I will say that one more time.
Woo!
$115 million for policing. Are some of those services needed? Absolutely. But the question that we have to ask is, can we reduce the need for police if we invest in other areas such as education, community policing, training for police, you know, those types of things. So that was Friday night. I want to talk mostly about Sunday and mostly about Monday. So Sunday we went to Nubian Square, which is, I believe, newly renamed in Roxbury. And we marched from
It is
there.
literally renamed.
Yes, because it was I forget who it was, but there was some racist family that had named that square, and people said, absolutely not. It's Nubian Square now. So it has
Yeah,
officially been renamed.
yeah.
We marched from there to the State House. I was joined by a friend who has been to demonstrations before, but never one, I would say, of this caliber, a white friend. And we walked. And, I'm not a physically fit person. I want everybody to know. And, and, and some, and some of these walks are like 6, 7 miles. So, but to me, that is not even a consideration in my mind. But that's part of, what we have to do to show up. So we get on Sunday to the protest, and three different marches merged. So we're talking, I don't know what the numbers are. We'll have to fact check and see what the numbers are. My guess would be at least 10,000 people, at least. And, we're there, there's chanting, there's people, just my dad asked me a really great question. What are you hoping to gain by going to these marches? Because he and I are not politically aligned. And I said, part of it is being isolated. I feel like I'm the only person that feels this anger about these deaths. I haven't been able to talk to anybody. I haven't been able to grieve with anybody.
Mm.
So I feel so going to that protest and marching and getting out some energy and yelling and seeing 10,000 people around you, I immediately feel like validated. I'm not the only person that feels this way. I'm not. So it's a communal
Mm.
grieving, a collective grieving that I enjoy, but also showing solidarity is another reason. So, we're at the park and it's about 9 o'clock, trying to be respectful of the curfew, trying to social distance as much as we can. It's 9 o'clock, the curfew's there. All right,
Oh yeah.
why
So
don't
how
we
was
head out?
that? How was that protesting but trying to social distance at the same time?
It was as good as it
Not a
could be
thing.
with that many people. I will say that there were parade marshals, which they're called. They're often dressed in neon colors that had masks, hand sanitizer, water. We were continually reminded to try to keep distance. So there were mechanisms in place.
Hmm.
A lot of people double parked in their car, and if they had sunroofs, they stayed in their car and listened and yelled. So people did what they could do. But that's part of the risk that I'm willing to take to
Yeah.
show up and show solidarity. So, Sunday night, it's 9:15, trying to observe the citywide curfew in Boston, and then a large firework goes off. So, when that happens, in my experience, that is a signal to people to we're leaving this area and now we're taking the streets. Okay, so it's the real no justice, no peace, the blocking of traffic. That is kind of the signal. So me, I thought, okay, I'm here for a peaceful protest, as many people are. It's time to go. So we walk down from the Commons, and I'm still with my friend Dean. This is his first kind of caliber of this. And we are met by police blocking the streets. So you can't go down this way. And there are a ton of people protesting. And they're chanting, who do you protect? Who do you serve? Whose streets are streets? No justice, no peace. And saying to a police officer, these things in their face with about 6 feet distance, it's warranted. And that's what people do. And I understand their ability or their feelings of maybe coming under attack. But then people started throwing water bottles, people started throwing projectiles, and I don't care. I think if an organization systemically is going to brutalize some people, the people are going to fight back. So, and by the way, they're water bottles, you know, it's like, okay,
Yeah, they're in full riot gear. What is a war bottle going to do?
I will say, and I'm not, there's no point in this conversation where I'll sympathize with police. I just want to paint a picture for everybody. The first people on hand are bicycle officers that have helmets and bikes and not a lot of protective clothing. Then come the over militarized
Okay.
bulletproof vests, that type of thing. So these were, but they're wearing helmets. And if you take a water bottle to the head, maybe that'll knock a little sense into you, and you get pissed and you get pissed off at the police who are making this happen. So you got to get pissed. So
Yeah.
they only took so much, and then the pepper spray came out, and it was an indiscriminatory pepper spray all of the crowd, uh, whether you're peacefully protesting or not. And what they do, and this is a tactic in the training, it's called a pushback. So they will pepper spray the entire people in front and then hold their clubs horizontally and literally club and push people back to create more space so they can advance. So I got hit with pepper spray. My friend Dean got hit with pepper spray. There were people, I mean, I'm talking 17-year-old young white girls who have never seen an injustice like being pepper sprayed for no reason. And they were screaming. They're like, I cannot Let's see someone helping. So I always, so,
Yo, I would have lost it.
oh, I did.
Nah,
Well,
you'd have
my
been
thing is
pepper sprayed. You'd have been struggling too.
for sure. But so because I've been to so many demonstrations and protests, I always, when I go to these, carry around mixtures of Malox, antacid, not mint, no flavor, no thing, and water, because that neutralizes pepper spray and tear gas. So I have this stuff on me, and I really did want to go home, but to me, in my gut, it's I have all of these supplies. I can't just walk away while people are shaking and writhing on the ground. So what I did for probably the next 2 hours, from about 9:15 to 11:30, is go where there were police altercations and literally pull people that have been pepper sprayed to the sidewalk, rinse out their eyes, make sure they're good, and go back to the front lines. And things got really bad. I've never seen anything like this. We were blocked in. Now, I don't know if how familiar your listeners are with Boston, but right down as you get to approach the theater district, there is a long corridor of just buildings, and which is akin to any city block. Well, the police blocked all four sides, so nobody's getting in and
So
nobody's
you
getting
can't
out.
get out.
No one's in, no one's out. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. So I go to the front lines as a white person, and I want to stand between my counterparts of color, because when the news cameras are there, the white people are not going to get shot and killed. They will not let that happen. That's something that I know to be true. And it kills me to say it.
Facts.
And what I try to do in these protests is call white people to the front. Use your privilege. Now, I'm I'm never going to be able to describe what was happening there, but canisters of tear gas being shot at me and over my head, pepper spray, clubbing, very aggressive police tactics. I will say that people picked up and threw the canisters back, or kicked the canisters, or had traffic cones to put over the canisters of tear gas to extinguish them. And for 2 hours, I dragged people up to the sidewalk and protested. And at one point, a person next to me got hit with a rubber bullet. And I'm telling you, I will never forget this, because I thought he had been shot by a bullet, not a rubber bullet, a bullet. This person hit the ground and gasped a breath that is unimaginable. Or maybe it's imaginable if you've ever watched somebody die. Um,
No, that's
and
that's
it,
scary just to hear.
oh, and I think that was the point where I thought, what the fuck is going on here? What's going on? Because this is not how we de-escalate. I'll tell you that much. You don't try to break things down by shooting people.
Does anybody feel like, not that it's strange, but isn't it just funny that all the women's movements and LGBT protests and marches that we've had, there has literally been no, this type of de-escalation of protests has never been used. And in a lot of situations where the protests are turning violent, it's because protesters are trying to leave and go home and respect curfews, and police either aren't letting them or responding with violence. It's just amazing. Like, this is not like, this protest is, when people are saying like this is getting violent and the violence and the blah 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 and complaining about that type of thing, I just want to challenge those people to think about why it is that no other protest, whether it be for the LGBTQ plus community, a women's march, whatever it is, has never has never been de-escalated or turned into the violence that we see here. If you can't see the correlation or the trend there.
That's because those protests weren't against the actual police. These are police brutality protests against the people who are trying to monitor everybody protesting. Like, it's actually against them.
True.
So they definitely feel a certain type of way going into it.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. But I will also say, I have to admit something, and it's going to be offensive, and I'm embarrassed to say it. So with you saying that, Asia, I think that the mere presence of black and brown people alarms people, and it frightens them from an institutionalized
I would agree with
systemic
that.
system
I
that has
totally
created
agree.
that fear for no reason. And I'm going to tell you something, and I'm embarrassed to say
This
this.
is an open forum.
Yeah, a lot of these marches have started in areas of Boston where I've only driven through. I've never walked. I don't know. They've primarily started in
Mhm.
neighborhoods of color, right? And, Dudley Square, Roxbury, parts of Dorchester that I don't go
Mhm.
too much, and shame on me. So that's one realization that I've had, that why am I only in these neighborhoods when I'm protesting, um, or trying to get justice for a Black person's life? And I'll say, that there was one time I was walking by myself. It was late. I was in, what I would say people would call, in definitely a less than privileged neighborhood, an underfunded neighborhood, some might say a forgotten neighborhood of Boston, which were primarily elderly people and people of color. And I approached a group of maybe, let's say 15, mostly Black men. And as I'm approaching, just in my belly, in my stomach, I just feel, that little nervous feeling that you get for some reason. Like, I call it the pre-diarrhea feeling. Like when you're about to shit your pants, like you got,
That's
Yes,
anxiety,
it
no?
is.
That's the anxious
It
feeling.
it
that's
it is. And
anxious.
and
Yes.
I noticed that feeling, and I just got bullshit at myself. And I realized that I am still, no matter how much work I'm doing, how many protests I go to, no matter
Yeah.
how much education I do, that ingrainment doesn't leave you easily. I'm going to have that for the rest of my life. But we have to, as allies and white people, suppress that and fight that and ask ourselves why. And I was bullshit. But I made that realization, and that's never going to happen again because I had that internal conversation. But it was shocking to me.
No, and that's something that we touched on the last episode. Like,
Yeah.
no matter who you are, no matter like as a white person or as a person like a non-person of color, you have these certain type of bias, or you have these certain type of bias feelings, or these certain type of biases that no matter who you are, no matter what you believe in, they're still in you, and no matter how much of an ally you are, they're still there because they've been ingrained in you. It's
Yeah.
because it's so systematic.
And also, like,
Yeah.
but even you saying that, Brian, when people are asking me like what something that I'm worried about, and then we'll get into some of the comments and questions that we have, but something that I am personally worried about is all these people who are now standing up and saying that they're part of this movement. At some point, the momentum is going to slow down whenever the protests stop, or at some point that's going to happen. And are you still going to be, what are you going to be doing after that ends to stand up to what you're saying you're going to do, to put your money where your mouth is? And to me, even having that self-reflection, Brian, to say like, I walked through a neighborhood that was predominantly Black. I saw a group of Black men. I became nervous for a second. Now making yourself aware that that prejudice and that bias happened, the next time, and this is why it's so important to make connections with people that don't look like you from an early age, because if
Hmm.
if somebody who knows me, any one of my white friends knows, Jared knows, he comes to my family cookouts. I have a lot of fucking cousins, and the majority of them are men. My grandmother has 30 something grandchildren, and there is literally 6 girls.
Jesus.
They are all men. So when you see, this is a direct message to people that have reached out to me, to my friends that have met my family. When you see a group of 10 Black men, or 5 or 3 or 2 or even 1, and you get that feeling, what I need you to do every day moving forward is to check that feeling, understand that that feeling is something that is not
Hello.
necessarily your fault because it was ingrained in you, but then think to yourself, well, this could be so and so's brother. This could be Asia's cousins. You've met my cousins. They came to my basketball
Hmm.
games. You've met these people. You've been to my house. You've been to my family cookouts. And maybe you were nervous when you came to my cookout. I don't know. You may have never told me, but that's fine too. But understanding that you're having those feelings and then changing them moving forward, and then passing that down to your children, is what is going to help move us forward. I'm talking like years and years and years, because this is a marathon, right? So I just wanted to say that.
No, I agree with that. But to that point, like you said, they felt nervous coming to your family's
I
house
don't
with all
know
these
if they
Black
did.
people.
I'm just saying they may have.
They could have, but how could they not see how us as people of color who are always around just nothing but white people and by ourselves, how we do not get that
Exactly.
nervous feeling
Exactly.
or do not
Exactly.
feel 100% comfortable
Exactly.
around them.
Great point.
And that's what I don't understand about how now all of a sudden it's coming out to the forefront and they're understanding that when in the past it
Yeah.
hasn't.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but that's a good point, Jared. I'm glad you said that. But I wanted to give us a few minutes on this episode because Brian has Jared and I have both gotten a lot of questions and comments and feedback and just white people saying like, this is what they've been doing. This is what they've put into action and asking questions. And as I said at the beginning of the podcast, it's tiring answering your questions. There's a lot of texts I haven't responded to yet. Please don't take that personally. However, we have compiled some of your questions and comments, and we want to ask them to Brian as an ally so that you all can get also an ally perspective with a little sprinkle of how Jared and I feel and our perspective. And thank you, Brian, for offering to answer some of these questions. So let's get started.
All right.
The first one I want to say is, in addition to educating myself, what is the most helpful thing I can do on a day-to-day basis to make sure I'm practicing anti-racism even after the protests are over? Which is a great segue because we were just talking about this. So, Brian, any suggestions for the allies?
Yes. So the first thing that I will say for allyship, and we had this conversation before on the Done with Adulting podcast, is
Yep.
you have to be aware of how much space you take up, number one. And, my dad has always told me, and this has always been a struggle for me, if you're talking, you can't listen. It's impossible to listen while you're talking. So day to day, take some time listen to what people are saying, resources. My preferred way of continuing momentum is paying attention to political leaders, to legislation, to practices. I understand that our system is not set up for transparency. So guess what? Day to day, you can do some work trying to figure out what's actually going on in our justice system. But
Right.
if you are listening to this and you do want to continue doing this work, I'm going to offer you two pieces of advice. Right now, go to campaign0.org. I believe that's the website. They have outlined a 10-step plan to start to demilitarize, defund police, improve community police relations. I was listening to the mayor of Atlanta. They have instituted in the city of Atlanta that all rookie police must spend 6 hours a week for a year at the Atlanta. It's not the Boys and Girls Club, but it's a youth program that they have.
Yep.
And
Yep.
her point kind of was that I don't want the first interaction with the police and these young black and brown kids to be them chasing them because they stole a lollipop and then shooting them. I don't want that to be the first interaction. So, they Campaign Zero calls for that. They also call for the Department of Justice to
That's
institute.
powerful.
Yeah. They want the Department of Justice to institute legislation that calls for objective outside investigations into police related killings, anything that can be deemed as excessive force. Look, there are bad people. Sometimes the police have to kill people, and I understand that. But we need an objective, outside look at things. So, following legislation, voting, you can't be an ally and then show up and vote for a racist. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Say it again for the people in the back. Say it one more time because I don't think they heard you.
You cannot be an ally and then use your power of a vote to perpetuate people who pass legislation that systemically puts down black and brown people, Americans, and people of color. You
In
can't do it.
Jesus'
It's not only is it a slap. Not only is it counterproductive, but it's not helping. You're not part of the solution. You're part of the problem. So really think about who you're voting for. Okay. And also, too, I want people to pay attention to the city of Somerville, Mass. They have just declared racism a public health emergency in Somerville, Massachusetts.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Yeah. So they are adopting Ayanna Pressley's 10-step plan for combating racism and reducing police brutality. And it also, what declaring it a public health emergency, it allows public health dollars in the Massachusetts system, in the budget, as well as municipal budget, to study racism, to study the
Great.
effects of being black on public health. In Boston, Massachusetts, there is a 30-year age disparity between black people who live in Boston and white people. The life expectancy for a black person in Boston is 57 years old. It is 77 years old for a white counterpart.
And why is that? Do you know?
20 years just for the color of your skin.
That has a lot to do with systemic health disparities.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation. Allies, if you want to understand the health disparities and the way that blacks have been kept down in the healthcare system, tested on, look up the Tuskegee studies. This goes back for hundreds of years, and the health disparities, this has to do with why black women are 2 or 3 times more likely to die during childbirth. It's all part of
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. Yep.
it's all part of the health disparities that black people face, and it's a great point. Do your research.
Yeah. Do your research.
Next question for you. So you brought up the whole voting thing. This is a personal question to you, like personal belief. Do you think that all Trump
Yes.
voters are racist? Are you answering that before I answer, or before I ask the question? Or
I'll answer it. I mean, I've said it before on this podcast. I don't think that everybody that votes for Donald Trump is inherently or overtly racist. I think that all racists vote for Donald Trump. That's what I know to be true. And here's the thing: show me who your friends are, and I'll show you who you are. So if you're going to if you're going to roll around with a pig, you're going to get dirty. And that's the bottom line on that. I mean, I think we have to admit that everybody is a little inherently racist, and there
Hello.
are things like microaggressions when saying, "Well, you're pretty for a black girl." That's racist.
yes, can you actually touch on that a little bit more? Because I don't think, especially the people who reached out to us, we haven't actually touched on microaggressions, but
We talked a lot about microaggressions in our last one with Brian too.
yes,
I think, but definitely touch on it.
yeah.
Again.
So I don't think the
Yeah.
people that reached out to us actually like understand what that is and how they actually practice that.
All right. So the quick down and dirty. There's two things I want everybody to remember. There's covert racism and there's overt racism. So think about the analogy with an iceberg. How with an iceberg, you only see a tiny bit of the iceberg above sea level. And then you look down and the iceberg is huge underwater. So at the top of the iceberg, we have overt racism. So burning crosses, using inflammatory language, not letting your kids play with black people, not wanting black or brown people to live in your neighborhood. Those are all overt acts that we can see. So under the water, the bigger part of the iceberg is covert racism. So saying things like, "You're pretty for a black girl," or saying it's things that, "Oh, blacks, they're the best athletes." Um, you know, choosing not to eat at black owned businesses, but just not trying to eat at black owned businesses or spend money in black communities. That's covert racism, and it's ingrained in all of us. I gave a perfect example of covert racism: feeling the presence of brown and black people when it made me feel anxious. Covert racism. It's the stuff that you don't see. So you have to be aware of that.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you
like
for
that
that.
analogy, the iceberg analogy. I love it.
So this next one was a really, really popular one that I got. I got at least 8 or 10 of the same type of message
Yep.
in the past 2 weeks, which was, my family and friends are not open or receptive to a conversation about race. What should I do? Or another way that I've heard this question is, I had a conversation about race for the first time with my family in the past 2 weeks, and it did not go well. It was very emotional. I'm afraid to bring it up again. Where do I go from here? you don't want me to answer this question.
Yeah, I was to say,
Yeah.
I had the answer already ready to go.
But I'm gonna let Brian answer because I don't want. This is the point of having Brian on. Okay, this is a different person's perspective that is not a Black person.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think.
So I'll speak again for me. I have done better in the past 5 years of realizing when I'm going to make headway and when I'm not going to make headway. I gave an example to somebody why saying all lives matters, like what that sounds like to me. So, the example I gave, one house on your street is on fire. Somebody whose house is not on fire says, "Hey, aren't you going to spray my house?" Your house isn't on fire. Why would we spray it? Well, all houses matter. And they just came back and said to me, well, a firefighting tactic is to spray houses next to houses that are on fire so the fire doesn't transfer. And at that
No
moment I knew,
way, bro.
I swear to God. And at this point I realized I am talking to a person that does not want to understand, that is not open, they're not willing, they are going to combat with me, and there is nothing that you're going to do to change their mind. So I think the first thing, and it's tough to do, especially with our families, you have to identify goals of conversations. With my family, it is very frustrating because they don't always get it, but they're open to listening, and they don't say the right things a lot of the time, like in response. So what I try to do, and maybe this will work for people, I like to answer questions with questions, right? So it's sort of this trickery of dumbing things down. Okay, I actually have a great example. Irish people, Italian people, Jews have all come here and been discriminated against. Why hasn't the Black community been able to? And this is something you'll hear, I'm sure people have heard. Why isn't the Black community able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and get past all this? And my response to that was, well, first and foremost, Irish, Italians, Jews have never had laws passed where they were enslaved and then counted as 3/5 of a person, and then had separate but equal, but it wasn't equal, and then laws like Jim Crow established, and then tried to buy a house and were looted, robbed, and houses were set on fire. This didn't happen. So I like to give examples until people start to get a little annoyed, because my goal is always, I want them to agree with me, right? So you have to temper the conversation. And then my second thing is, Jews, Irish, Italians, they all have passing privilege. They all can be perceived as white. Black people can't pretend to be white. They can't take off the color of their skin. So there is a clear marker. This person is Black, so therefore this person is all of these things that I've been taught. So giving real examples to your friends and family is one thing. The other thing, before you have any conversation, educate yourself, because you're not helping the cause by, fighting with people and not making cohesive, strong arguments. Educate yourself. Everybody that hasn't read it, read the book White Fragility, Why It's Hard for White People to Talk About Race in America. And then after you're done with that book, I want you to pick up The New Jim Crow. And then after you're done with that book, I want you to watch 13th by Ava DuVernay. Okay? It's on Netflix and it's free.
There's
Everybody
a
has
lot of
Netflix,
resources
no
out there.
excuses.
A lot of resources out there.
Something else I also want to add, which is almost not even just how to have difficult conversations, but basic communication skills. I literally tweeted the other day, some of y'all really lack basic communication skills, and it shows. But especially with white people, don't take this the wrong way, y'all, but y'all don't like to be told you're racist, or you're exhibiting covert racist behaviors. You don't want to be told that. And so when you're having these difficult conversations now with your family members, a white person to a white person, and you're going into the conversation understanding that it's going to be a tough one, that's the first step. Also, don't go in with any expectations. If you don't go in with every time I have a hard conversation with a white person or anybody about anything, I always expect that they're probably not going to get it. So that way, when I come out of it, I'm not as emotional about it when they don't get it. But at the same time, every conversation we have has to come from a place of empathy and understanding. So even though white people conversations that I've had, let me tell you, in the past 2 weeks, I've had a white person say to me, I've pointed out an example of their privilege and how it hurt me. And they responded and said, that's not what I meant. And so it's not fair for you to say that I was acting privileged. These are real responses that I've received. My point here is you have to come from a place of mindful conversation and mindful listening and understanding. So even when that person said that to me, my response is not to go from 0 to 100, but I've worked really hard on being able to control that. My response is to say, great. I understand that that was not your intention. And I also understand that now you are upset. However, I'm still going to tell you how I feel as well. And because I just gave you the understanding, I expect the same understanding back to me as I give you my point of view and this is a real tiptoey pity patty way of having conversations. I understand that. And it takes a fucking long time, which is why I'm tired. And now I'm on a soapbox. But anyways, I just wanted to say that because if we can do that on a daily basis, which I am happy to do because I am happy to have conversations with people who want to learn more and be better people, you can do it with your family and friends. And if you're not willing to get in a fight with a friend or a family member over, execution
Racism.
of Black people, then you're not ready to do this. And you
an
need
ally.
to look inside yourself again.
Right. And I also want people to remember the idea of intersectionality, because people aren't just black and white. We have gay black people. We have we have trans black women. We have, which I call like the triple threat, because there are people hating them in 3 different ways. So we have to remember intersectionality, and that matters for representation. So I would ask you to commit to coming up with metrics and get back to us, because I want to hear what you do and what your plan is to improve, what you're doing. Remember racial sensitivity. Remember where your voice is as an ally. Don't, please, everybody stop posting white people. Please stop posting the black fist emoji, the black power symbol. That is not for us. Please, that's something that you can definitely do. If I see another white person post a black fist, that's black power. That is by black people and for black people. And the mere presence of that fist being held by black people is a sign of protest. We have not earned that. We caused that. So don't do that.
What's your thought? What's your thought on the social media justice? Do you think coming from white people, do you think it's actually genuine, or do you think it obviously depends on the specific person?
I think it's a necessary evil, right? Because not everybody's going to get it right. People are going to be more offensive sometimes, but it's sort of that social progression. But I think there's 2 things that they're becoming part of the conversation. B, it's their network that they're exposing, these sort of ideas to, but also, and C, the internet, we would not be organizing. Like, imagine the civil rights movement with the internet. We wouldn't even have 80% of these issues anymore. So it's a great way to organize. I will say performative allyship, the allyship where you're going to the protest to take a picture in a cute ass outfit and then get likes.
Yo, I've seen videos of people just like going there just to take pictures, just to be an influencer, say, oh, I was there. Like, it's ridiculous.
It's crazy. And I just want to add, like, it doesn't matter what you posted today. I don't care if you posted a black square. I don't care if you posted a monologue about what you're doing like, all that matters is that whatever you did off social media, okay? Like, there is power in having influence to people that follow you and educating those people and bringing them along on your journey of education. But if you posted a black square and then that was all you did for the day, you didn't educate yourself, you didn't sign any petition, you didn't learn about, like, you didn't look at policy, whatever, and you can lay your head down at night and be happy with that, then so fucking be it. But to me, it's what you're doing off of social media, because you can only get so far with influencing.
Yeah, I've seen like I know people who I've had conversations with who told me they don't see color. We're all the same. We're all equal. And then I've seen them post a square. I've seen them reach out to me, and I'm like, you're just doing this because everybody else is.
I want to just say one more thing about performative allyship. I saw somebody yesterday who I knew, a white man, um, post a screenshot of a $25 donation to Black Lives Matter nationally. And I thought, great. No, and I thought it was great. We all can do something. So then I clicked to the next picture, and it is a photo of him wearing a Breitling watch, which is about $30,000 and worn by the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force in the UK, in front of his Mercedes-Benz emblem that he was driving on his car. I DM'd him immediately and I said, that's a great watch. That's a great car. Hey, do you think that you could commit to making that $25 donation reoccurring or get 5 of your friends to match it? And he said, yes, sure. But like, how you have to be aware of what you're doing. I'm posting $25,000 and then posting a picture of assets as a 28-year-old man that are about $100,000. One of these things is not like the other. So call that
Call it
shit
out.
out when you see it and put the pressure on people. And some people aren't going to like it. And guess what? No skin off my ass. I don't care if you don't like it. I'm still going to say it because guess what? I'm an ally. And that's what I'm here to do.
I just want people to start holding others accountable when they see
Yes.
something wrong and putting them on Front Street. That's really all I
Right.
want.
That's the best way to be an ally moving forward, even after the protests are over. Hold people accountable. Your friends that you have that are close to you that you knew would say some suspect racist shit at parties sometimes, but you never called them out because whatever reason. Now, if you are a part of the movement and you're an ally, now is the time to call those people out. Even your family, your friends. I don't care who it is. It's literally
Right.
those little actions
Gotta
every
do
day,
it.
holding yourself accountable the way Brian did when he walked down the street and noticed his bias, holding your friends accountable and your family accountable. And I just feel like that's the best thing that we all can do. Brian, we're not going to take up too much more of your time, but thank you so much for coming on for the third time.
Triple OG.
It's a pleasure.
Is that Brian's new
Triple
name?
OG.
Triple OG.
You know what? I think that we should wait a
We'll see
little
how it
bit.
goes.
And I think that I don't know if that, given everything that we've just discussed, I'm not sure that I want to be OG, triple OG.
Great awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. Asia and Jared, though, I want to say to you, and I said this to Asia before, that I'm really sorry that you have to deal with this. And I'm really sorry that you guys, again, for years and years, and unfortunately, hopefully not years to come, that you're going to have to face this sort of prejudice. And we all know that the pendulum of justice moves slowly. I'm sorry, but the only thing that I can do, and the only thing that I will promise to both of you, is to continue to be an ally and to show up. And when you're tired, to step in and to make sure that I make noise and march and cause a problem, because the way Black and brown people are disenfranchised in this country is not okay. And I'm not going to have it
I appreciate that.
anymore.
That's a true ally.
True ally. If you hadn't have said that to me the other day at work, I probably would have cried again. But the first time you said it to me, we were both in full tears of not breathing. It was a really heavy day. But no, we appreciate you, Brian.
It was
No, you're a real one. You're a real one for sure.
You're a real one.
I appreciate it, guys.
You guys know the deal. If you like this episode and this podcast, please like, subscribe, rate, and review.
And if you hear things in this episode that you want to know more about, or you want to learn more, put something in the comments. I'm going to monitor. I'm here to help. I know I sound aggressive. I know that I'm catty and an asshole. I know all of these things, but I'm here to help. And I will vet organizations. I will have these conversations. I mean, Asia and Jared know me personally. I would talk to anybody about anything at any time and give people the time of day in a respectful way. So please feel free to use me as a resource, because I'm good at establishing boundaries and what I will and will not tolerate.
Great. Y'all know the deal. IG at Done with Adulting Pod.
Follow us on Twitter, done, WTH, adulting. Brian, we appreciate you as
We
always.
appreciate you.
Thanks for having
We
me.
appreciate you, listeners. Keep up the work. Talk to you next week.
Bye.